Good morning, everyone. I'm Linda Klug, the Programs Chair for MAHTN. Once again, thank you for joining us today for this MAHTN webinar. We actually have a double header today with Derrick Stowell here, talking about our main topic, which is sowing seeds for the future of HT. He's going to share some very interesting research with us. And that's going to be followed by our MAHTN annual meeting. So just so you know, for your own scheduling purposes, the first part will be approximately an hour. And then the MAHTN meeting component will be about half an hour. And we hope everyone stays on for both of those. So again, I'd like to welcome you, and I'd like to especially welcome Derrick, who, we started working with Derrick much earlier this year with the hopes that he could be a presenter at our planned in-person annual conference this year, which of course didn't happen. But Derrick was kind enough to say he would come again and virtually share what he was going to talk about in person for us. So just as a few points of introduction for Derrick, he's the Education and HT Program Administrator for the University of Tennessee Gardens. He's worked there since 2012, and he's been primarily responsible for advancing their horticultural therapy program. He's a registered horticultural therapist and a certified recreation therapist, and he has served on the board of directors for AHTA from 2016 to 2018. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Derrick.
All right, thank you. I first want to thank everybody for joining me today for this presentation. Your passion and dedication for the profession of horticultural therapy is inspiring, and it's what challenges me to do more every day. This past year, I had the chance to meet and learn about horticultural therapists around the country who are doing great work as part of my dissertation research, which I'll be sharing the results here today with you. But wow, here we are, 2020. So when I was approached by MAHTN to do this presentation earlier in the year, I had no idea what was to follow in the months to come. I mean, who would have really thought that we would have run out of toilet paper? But we did. And we experienced a pandemic that I could only imagine happening in a movie. Millions have been infected and many have died. Economies have shut down. Healthcare facilities have locked out family members and other visitors. And many people have lost jobs and loved ones. Trying to process all this and deal with the rapid changes happening overnight have caused increased mental and physical health issues. During the shutdown, my wife made a big mistake. She suggested that I order a few seeds and start working with my kids to grow microgreens at the house. So I have 4 children ranging from freshman in high school to a first grader. So my wife's mistake was this: you never ask a horticulturist to grow just a few plants, right? Mm-hmm. You buy 1, 2, 5, 20 more plants. You won't stop until you can find every square inch of your home and your yard and fill it with plants. So a few seeds turned into digging up the turf from a backyard and planting a victory garden. So this is the idea, was mentioned a lot throughout the media this year as the interest in gardening skyrocketed. The concept of victory gardens came about during World War I and World War II when the government rationed food among other items. As you can see, victory gardens were even promoted to help win the war. So as we were planting as a family, I decided to start making daily Facebook Live videos for friends and family to watch and encourage them to start gardening at home. And here are some photos of my kids. From left to right is Madeline, Dottie, TJ, and Josiah. So I got my kids involved in sowing, transplanting, watering, taking care of the garden. It became a family project. Even our dog was involved. I'd plant a cabbage plant in the ground. I'd go and put a broccoli plant, and he'd come right behind me and rip them out and eat them, which really made me very frustrated. And to be honest, I haven't grown a vegetable garden in my backyard in quite some time. But that time gardening was so important as our family was navigating this pandemic together. Part of planting that garden was to help relieve the stress and the thought that there would be no food in the grocery stores. I was preparing for the worst case scenario. At that time, the global economy supply chain was falling apart, and I, along with many others, were scared. But for us here in Tennessee, I'd go to the store and the paper towel and the toilet paper aisles were empty, the meat aisles were empty. But every time I went in, the fresh produce aisles were always overflowing. And what does that really say about our health and our nation? I'm sure that's more studies for the future. This interest in gardening has skyrocketed this year due to in part of the global pandemic. Tracy Talley from the American Seed Trade Association said that demand for seeds has tripled in size this year. Fear is a big motivator for people, but hope is even greater motivator than fear. You have probably seen this quote. I've got a copy of it on the wall in my office. But Audrey Hepburn has quoted as saying, "To plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow." Hope. The act of sowing a seed is hope. It is hope that the seed will germinate, grow, and produce something. It's hope that tomorrow will be better and the next day even better. So this hope, along with the people-plant connection, is what makes, in my opinion, horticultural therapy one of the most valuable interventions in today's modern world. We are completely dependent on plants for our survival, and it has been this way since the beginning of time. That innate connection between people and plants has been lost in modern society. We as horticultural therapists have the opportunity and responsibility to reconnect people to plants. And this is why the work we do is so vital. So I will be talking today about the professional horticultural therapy and ways for us to sow seeds for the future through creativity and collaboration. The concepts for my talk have been developed using the context of a study I conducted for my dissertation research, a review of horticultural therapy and horticultural therapy education in the United States. Between November 2019 and January of 2020, I conducted 27 semi-structured interviews of horticultural therapy professionals on the current challenges of horticultural therapy in the United States and their vision for the future. These interviews totaled over 8.5 hours. I transcribed them, coded them, and analyzed them to help answer my research question. What are the current challenges of horticultural therapy and horticultural therapy education in the United States? So one concept that came up in many of my interviews was the concept of nature and how horticultural therapy is a way to connect people to plants and nature. People feel better when they're around plants. Plants are comforting, plants provide beauty, plants give a fresh breath of life, and perhaps the only time being surrounded by plants could cause panic is when you're a horticulturist and you go to a plant sale with no money, or you can't figure out where to put one more plant in your yard. People do love plants. Some may not realize that. Some people might not even be able to identify plants. But seeing plants growing gives people a sense of wonder and interest in learning more about gardens, nature, and life. When I lead workshops and programs, I see participants come alive, especially when I introduce new plants or teach them new things about plants they already know. I also love the connections we can make with plants to our lives. Sometimes the rabbits eat all your fall veggies and you have to start all over again. I can speak from experience as I attempted to plant my fall victory garden this year. I had my plants in the ground, I was watering, they were looking great. And then of course I go out one morning and all of them are chopped off, eaten by the rabbits. But these types of connections and struggles in a garden are excellent ways to illustrate challenges in life and introduce concepts of resiliency. Another quote that I like is attributed to Christine Kane. When you are in a dark place, sometimes you tend to think you've been buried. Perhaps you've been planted, bloom. These types of connections to plants or metaphors, or plant metaphors, can help us connect to observable experiences of cultivating plants and to more challenging concepts related to our own health and well-being. In fact, these connections are what have been identified as part of what is considered embodied cognition and the connection to metaphors in nature-based therapy. Corazon, Shilab, and Stickdaughter have reported that these bodily movements connected to a metaphor can help improve therapeutic interventions. And gardening is an excellent place to create physical activity, body movements, and those connections. Another concept that came up during my study was the idea that horticultural therapy is a unique profession. So we have a unique therapy that is offered in unique settings, serving unique populations. One of the reasons for this is gardening can take place anywhere from hospitals to backyards, from growing plants in containers to planting an entire garden. These unique perspectives require horticultural therapy practitioners to possess a set of skills that helps us adapt and change to meet the needs of populations we are serving. These skills are unique, and the uniqueness of the profession truly give us an advantage over more traditional forms of therapy. This can help us address current issues in ways that other healthcare professionals might not be able to. It was identified in the studies also that a national professional association, such as the American Horticultural Therapy Association, is important to any healthcare profession. Likewise, regional groups are equally important to the future of the horticultural therapy profession. One study participant stated it perfectly when they said regional groups are the workhorses of the profession. Groups like MAHTN are able to connect to individual practitioners, other healthcare professionals, the media, the general public on a local level. They're able to respond potentially faster than a national organization can at times. So an example would be speaking with the news outlets or the media. Often when a news outlet wants to do a story, they have a very short timeline. So being able to find someone locally to talk to is critical. Local and regional groups have that ability to connect things faster, and regional groups can help promote the profession and provide those valuable networking connections to horticultural therapy practitioners. Regional conferences and events even give horticultural therapy practitioners opportunities to learn and network more than just once a year. If you aren't part of a regional group, I do encourage you to join your local group. If you live in an area that doesn't have a regional group, start one. In Tennessee, we don't have a regional group. So once I complete my dissertation in defense, which is going to happen in just a few weeks, I'm going to be looking at contacting some folks and trying to start an informal group here in Tennessee. Another thing that I was really encouraged about earlier this year was American Horticultural Therapy Association began some conference or discussions with the regional groups, networking groups, and they started discussing ways that they could work together. So I find that very encouraging. And I know a lot of that had to do somewhat to what's been going on related to the pandemic. So despite the potential impact we have as horticultural therapists that we can have on health and well-being in the U.S., we have some other challenges or weaknesses to overcome. Understanding and addressing these challenges can in fact be one of the defining elements that propels the profession into the future. So one challenge that came up in the discussions is the lack of public awareness of the profession. I'm sure you've been asked similar questions like these in the past. What do you do? Do you help plants feel better? In fact, I've got a friend, every time I'm with him in a group, he asks me to tell him what I do again. He says it's fascinating. The lack of public awareness is perhaps one of the biggest challenges we have, but it's also potentially one of the easiest ones we can solve. Study participants mentioned that when they tell others about horticultural therapy, they have never had anyone say, quote, well, that's a dumb idea. Most often when presented with the concept of horticultural therapy, people agree that it is a great idea and a valuable therapeutic intervention. So why does the profession struggle so much with public awareness? Some of that has to do with funds and cost to develop marketing campaigns. It's very expensive for groups to do that. Other reasons may deal with the fact that we are busy doing what we do best as horticultural therapists, and that's helping people. Another reason could be that many of us may not feel like they have the skills or knowledge to talk to the media and do interviews. Before I worked for the UT Gardens, I was responsible for running a camp for children with limb loss for the Amputee Coalition of America. And the first year I started working there, I had to start taking questions of the media and do interviews. And I had no idea how to talk to the media. I was quite frankly terrified. So first year turned out okay. I did an okay job. They didn't fire me, and I was able to work there for 4 more years. Each year I got a little bit better at working with the media. And in fact, one year we ended up having 3 news outlets at the camp all day because 2 of our volunteers were some celebrities that they wanted to interview. So I was responsible for driving those people around on golf carts around camp, connecting them to campers and counselors and doing interviews and managing the media. And I really wouldn't have been able to do that unless I had the encouragement and practice in the years past. So one of the things that's important to know about working with the media is to keep your message short and to the point, because we all know that they like to cut what people say down into 1 or 2 different sound bites. But public awareness is key to getting funds, more program participants, and eventually gaining more champions for the profession. And these champions may one day be the driving force for us to get legislation to pay for insurance reimbursement, possibly licensure, and funds for future research. These champions also maybe one day go into a healthcare facility and ask for horticultural therapy to be added as part of the treatment. Healthcare is an evidence-based practice. Without it, we don't have the way to inform our program development. We don't have a basis to support keeping horticultural therapists on staff. We cannot get paid what we deserve to be paid to do what we do. And that improves health and well-being for populations. So maybe you don't like research. Maybe those technical journals hurt your head. Maybe your program is making it fine without research, and that's great. But if we want to move forward and increase the horticultural therapy program impact, increase demand for our programs, increase number of horticultural therapists, and increase pay for services, and thus ultimately increase your salaries, we need to do research. I lost a $100,000 grant one time because I simply did not include the evidence-based information about the program I was proposing. I had all the information together, and I had applied to another grant before that, and that foundation didn't like research. So I took all that out and forgot to add it back in for this next proposal, and I lost $100,000. Big mistake. Also important to read the instructions when you're applying for grants. But it's important to know that research is one of the key elements that we need to move forward. So we need research. We need research conducted in the United States. Why? Because our healthcare system is unique and our culture is different. We need research based in the United States to help inform our practice in the United States. So don't get me wrong, research from other countries is excellent and also very important for the profession. But to move the profession forward in the United States, we must conduct research that can quantify what we do here. Some of the research being published in the United States on impacts of gardening and healthcare outcomes has been led by other researchers, by occupational therapists and other allied health professions, not horticultural therapists. We have to be involved in that research. So maybe you are not a researcher, but let's all be willing to collaborate so we can create a solid research and really take the profession to the next level. When I'm talking about research, I'm also not just talking about the clinical side of horticultural therapy. I'm talking about how all aspects and all delivery settings. There's just as much importance in researching horticulture therapy in the community and how it can improve health and well-being for different populations. There are no jobs. There isn't any money to pay us. Those are some comments made by study participants. Funding for horticulture therapy is a limiting factor for our profession. And we talk a lot about insurance reimbursement and that goal. And I'm a certified therapeutic recreation specialist also. And the recreational therapy profession has spent many years and lots of money paying for advocacy, pushing legislation at the national level, state levels to pay for recreational therapy services. And they're still not there. And horticulture therapy is even further behind on that front. So we know funding is an issue and a big challenge. Without it, we have no jobs, and ultimately we have no programs and no horticultural therapy. So to be honest, I don't think the insurance reimbursement is going to be anything we see happen in the immediate future. As health insurance companies are trying to find ways to cut interventions, save money, and reduce reimbursements, they're less likely to fund things like horticultural therapy. So we do need to find alternative funding sources like donations, grants, private pay, and other sources maybe we haven't even considered yet. I do want to say we still need to work towards getting insurance reimbursement, but that's going to take a lot longer for us to get there. So I've got this photo here. I took it dropping off my kids to school one morning. And you see in this picture, is it a sunrise? Well, I already told you the answer, but is it a sunrise or a sunset? And if you look at a picture, it's hard to tell, right? Unless you knew which way you're directing your camera. And I really think that we as horticultural therapy is headed east. I'm in belief that we're facing east and we're watching the profession as it's growing into a new day. So now that I've spent the last few minutes talking about the bad stuff, let's move on and look at the solutions, look at opportunities for our future as a profession, because I really believe that we have more to look forward to, and those things far outweigh all the challenges that we have as a profession. So global climate change, it's a hot topic, pardon the pun, but as more research data comes out on the global climate change and the impacts that it is having on marginalized populations, people are becoming more aware of and taking part in environmental movements. In particular, the growing trend of farmers markets, agritourism, community gardens can help move the profession of horticultural therapy forward. People are more interested in knowing where their food comes from. They are finding that the global supply chains have failed us in times of pandemic, where we can't find products in big box stores. We can go to our local farmer and get produce or other agricultural products we might need. So back in April, my family couldn't find beef, like many Americans. So what did? We found a local farming group that also was a therapeutic program. called Century Harvest Farms. They don't have a horticultural therapist on staff yet, but they need to. But data shows, and the Sustainable America reports that farmers markets have seen a 76% growth between 2018 and 2014. Community gardens have shown that the benefits of horticulture in urban settings increases, such as the increase in access to fresh produce, reduced crime, increasing community development, have all been documented, as well as promoting sustainable agriculture and reducing negative environmental impacts. The Trust for Public Land reports that the number of community gardens has grown 44% between 2012 and 2018. So these trends, along with other environmental trends, help to illustrate that the general public is open and receptive to learning how horticultural therapy could benefit their health and well-being. I believe we do have more opportunities than ever to reach new audiences by offering new types of programs in gardens and other community settings. So technology, we're talking a little bit about that at the beginning here. Technology is great, but as we see, it can also be a challenge. As people begin to see the negative impacts of too much screen time, horticultural therapy can be there to offer a solution. We have never been more aware of too much screen time than 2020. Look, here we are all looking at a screen, right? Don't get me wrong. I am very grateful for this, to be able to connect with other horticultural therapists using Zoom and video conferencing. But I do long for those chances to meet back in person and network at local events again. Virtual schooling and the lack of in-person programming has increased awareness and need to unplug and go outside. We're even seeing schools create outdoor classroom space as a way to keep in-person programming going during the pandemic. We as horticultural therapists can offer our expertise to help combat too much screen time, provide outdoor programming in nature, and address issues such as behavioral problems, obesity, poor mental health, lack of nutrition, and much more. There are many new opportunities to develop programs and study the impacts of horticultural therapy on issues surrounding too much screen time. The profession of horticultural therapy is unique. We serve a variety of populations. We work in a variety of settings and climates. This unique reason is one reason why people love being a horticultural therapist. However, we have some work to do. Many study participants acknowledge that the profession is made up of, quote, older white women. These comments are supported by past studies of our profession, including Stover and Mattson's 1993 study, and Larson's 2010 study. How do we increase inclusiveness and diversity? And when we're talking about inclusiveness and diversity, I'm talking both as professionals, increasing professionals that are diverse, but also in our programs, the people that we serve. We must do that through intentional efforts. And I think one way is to first look at the types of programs we create, new programs that help society process what is going on in the world today. The deaths of people of color, such as George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and countless others, have caused great anguish across the nation. The protests of Black Lives Matter groups across this nation have also created new tensions among others. Our political divides appear to be growing with more divisiveness each day, and these divides have dominated media and many of our lives. Our over-reliance on social media and technology has helped add fuel to that fire. But we as horticultural therapists have an opportunity to use gardening, plants, and nature to bring people together. Who doesn't feel better when spending time in a garden? The ability for a garden to calm and create a sense of peace can be a critical catalyst to help bring people together. These are the opportunities we need to explore and find ways to utilize our practice to create opportunities for our nation to heal and opportunities to increase inclusion and diversity within our profession. Another opportunity for moving the profession forward is through the school system. Kids today, right? As a father of four, I can tell you education in the United States is very different than it was even just a few years ago. Many school assignments are on laptops. Kids don't even get real textbooks printed on paper anymore. They often don't teach kids to write in cursive. And then now we have COVID-19. So mask wearing, sanitizing, distance learning, which distance learning is not necessarily a bad thing. More and more people are looking to create outdoor classrooms at all levels of education. Poor mental health, bullying, cyberbullying are just a few of the challenges we have to deal with daily. So what can gardening do? We know it can restore attention, it can reduce stress, it can lower ADHD tendencies, it can increase mindfulness, and much more. We as horticultural therapists have the opportunity to improve student outcomes just by going out into the schools and offering therapeutic programs. Many schools already have gardens. When I was an AmeriCorps volunteer in 2003, I worked at 4 schools in Knox County, Tennessee. They were all low-income schools. 2 were in the rural area of the county, and 2 were in the kind of urban area of the county. And so one day, we were building a garden for Vine Middle School. And I went around and asked the teachers for some students to help. And who did they ask to help them? Well, there were the students that they didn't want to have in class today because they're the ones that usually cause problems and don't listen to them, the ones that they didn't want to deal with. They gave them to me to go outside and build a garden. So we went outside, we were building the garden, everything was going great. And then the gym class came out and the garden area was just near their track. And so some other students start walking around the track, and the students I'm working with scream up at their friends, "Hey, look what I'm doing. I'm building a garden. Look at this." What I saw in that moment was the change and the impact that just simply gardening had on these students' behavior. I had no problems with them. They worked well with me. And I wasn't a trained therapist at the time, but I could see those changes in them. That sense of pride and excitement, building a garden transformed them. How much more impactful could we be as trained horticultural therapists working in school settings? How can we transform students' lives that have behavior issues, poor self-esteem, and other challenges? One of the things that I've seen in gardening, particularly in Knoxville, is this whole revolving door in schools. You know, I began working at the UT Gardens in 2012, and I've been involved in several groups trying to get gardening going in the city. And these people were very excited. They said, "Yeah, we're ready to build gardens." They're ready to go start digging up the ground, putting soil in, putting plants in. But, you know, we were building gardens in 2003. What happened between those 10 years? Well, teachers moved on to other schools or retired. Students moved up to new grades. Money ran out. There's no continuity in schools a lot of times. Schools are often very transient settings, you know, because of those changes. And what if we, as horticultural therapists, have the ability to help provide that continuity in school systems? What if we were able to use our skills to create evidence-based programs that produce measurable results for these schools? We could then use this to show that our profession can have measurable impact in school systems. We could also excite the next generation of horticulturists and horticultural therapists. The students could see types of careers and jobs they could have, and it could also provide solid connections to STEM learning and higher education. Now, I know for us in Tennessee, that's a challenge right now with COVID. We can't go into schools, but there are some things we can start planning and building as we move forward to hopefully once this pandemic is over. Whether we are offering programs in schools or in communities or clinical settings, one area that we can also work in is a concept of well-being. So one thing that gets me really frustrated is when I or someone I know goes to the doctor and they have a health issue. So much of our healthcare system is set up to deal with symptoms and not address the cause. It's like everything else, the quick fix, take the pill, it all gets better. You have pain, take a pill. And that has really led to this opioid epidemic we have in the United States. This way of looking at health and healing is partly due to insurance and payment. The more people you see, the more money the facility makes. It's so many times the doctors don't try to find underlying causes. So the concept of well-being to me is vital as we move forward. How do we deal with the prevention and everyday well-being and not just deal with health when someone's sick? And I think what a better place to do that is working in a garden setting. We have the ability to provide physical activity, nutrition information, mental health, are all identified as positive outcomes for horticultural therapy programs. So we all know the impact we can have on the world if people just knew what horticultural therapy is, right? And how do we get there? We have to promote who we are. We have to take the message of what horticultural therapy is and how it can help to the public. Many of us do this on a daily basis. In fact, many of those interviewed for my study recognize the importance of regional groups like MAHTN to promote the profession of horticultural therapy. But if I were to ask you what horticultural therapy is, how would you respond? One task I had in one of my graduate classes was to create my elevator speech. We started with a paragraph or two and we had to cut it down into one sentence. So if you don't have an elevator speech about what horticultural therapy is and what you do, write one down, practice it until you say it in your sleep. Better yet, even try to create a tweet to describe your program. And here's an example. Hashtag horticultural therapy, profession and education, sow, grow from vision to the future. Most importantly, no matter what question the reporters ask you, be sure to give your prepared answer. And you see that a lot in the interviews, right? But stay on point. We also need to start contacting the media and promoting our programs and practices. Now, working with regional groups to coordinate this is important, but don't just rely on them. Don't just rely on AHTA to do that work. Take initiative and start promoting horticultural therapy on your own. One program I do want to create is working with the media. How can I work with other horticultural therapists to learn and develop skills to help them promote the profession and their businesses? Moving forward, we must also continue and increase our networking with other horticulturists, therapists, and other horticultural allied health professions. We need to move more towards collaborations. We need to find and collaborate with people who are already in positions of influence. In the nonprofit world, we call those champions, people that learn about what you do and become passionate about it, people that open doors to opportunities that would not be possible otherwise. This can come in the form of finding medical professionals who see the value of horticultural therapy or researchers who have experience with government research funding. An example that I've learned recently related to government research is that you have to have a collaborative team. And the government agencies that are funding projects do not fund projects that have people that don't have people that have already received funding from them. So if I'm applying to National Institutes of Health grant, I need to have at least one person who has gotten NIH funding in the past. And the reason has a lot to do with the demand, number of people applying for grants. There's a lot of competition. So the funding agencies want to be sure that you can complete your work. Whether you have positive or negative results, they want to make sure the work can be done. So they simply don't even consider applicants who don't have past award winners on their research teams. And so that's one example of collaborating that we need to work better about, finding people that already have that research experience. So our great idea of horticultural therapy needs collaborators to move forward. So start thinking about who could help your cause, who in your organization, who in your local area, who at local healthcare organizations, who at local colleges. After working in Knoxville for 20 years, I've developed some relationships with news anchors, and I know which ones have interest in specific programs. Find out what news anchors may be interested in doing as a story and contact them. Local press often helps find new participants, new supporters, new collaborators. One person can't do it all, but if we start to identify people that could collaborate with our work, we can begin to invite them to become part of what we are doing. How are our horticultural therapy programs funded? What's worked in the past? What can work in the future? We really need more information about this, payment for horticultural therapy services, so we can then learn about trends and explore new funding structures. One area to think about is private pay. Americans spend over $30 billion a year on out-of-pocket complementary health expenses. We can have a piece of that. We just need to learn how to market our practices and the benefits of our programs. And then also ask the question, are there other funding structures that may not even be known yet? And this again is another area for more research. So COVID-19 has opened the doors for new networking opportunities, or at least forced us to use them. Zoom and other online programs have helped connect us in new ways. One of the most valuable and exciting and motivating things that I found doing my study was the opportunity to talk with horticultural therapists from around the nation. Those connections helped me to inspire me as a professional. Online workshops like this are important to expand our communities of practice. There's nothing more exciting than getting to go to a conference, meet new people, and learn about the work. One day we may have horticultural therapy departments in hospitals with 3 to 5 staff, or other hospitals in our area with more horticultural therapists who are working. But right now, we need to connect to other horticultural therapists. It gives us ideas, it gives us motivation to try new things. And we need to do that more than just once or twice a year. I think that is one of the positive things that we can see from this pandemic. And I really hope to see that this continues and this type of network continues in the months and years to come. Networking can teach us new skills to use in our practice. It can also help us learn about how others deal with funding and other challenges of the profession. The concept, another concept that came up was the idea of being a self-starter or an entrepreneur. Many horticultural therapists are self-starters. They've created their own businesses, and that type of go and do attitude is what has helped bring the profession to where it is today. So we need to be able to help others who want to start private practice. I created my position here at the UT Gardens. I started as a garden educator, and as I learned about horticultural therapy, I went to my supervisor and I said, we need to do this. And Dr. Hamilton, Dr. Sue Hamilton, who was the director of the gardens at the time, said, yeah, do it. She was and still is my champion. She saw my passion and my vision. She constantly encouraged me to take the next step. She taught me how to navigate the intricacies of the university system. And of course, by creating my own position, it really meant that I just gave myself a second full-time job, running education programming and horticultural therapy programming. Building horticultural therapy through entrepreneurship and starting from scratch is fun and exciting for some people. This type of program development is great, but as a profession, we need to think now about how do we create jobs for future practitioners? How do we create demand for what we know the world needs desperately, the connection of people to plants? It's our turn to think about ways to train, educate, and empower the next generation of horticultural therapists. So just for a recap, some of the main things that we discussed today were inclusion and diversity within the profession, both as getting more professionals that are diverse and including new people, but also in our programs and finding ways to take horticultural therapy and the elements of that to different populations and how that can impact the future of the profession. 2, we need to promote what we do. We need to do it locally and nationally. And that can be done in a lot of ways, including networking. So networking with other horticultural therapists, networking with other professionals, can also help expand the knowledge about what our services and what horticultural therapy can do. And ultimately, going from networking to collaboration is kind of the next step. You know, collaborating is more than just learning about what somebody's doing, but it's an invitation to work together. And we need to do that more. And finally, research, which again is a type of collaboration. We need to do more research and we need to come up with more studies. Randomly controlled studies is one of the things that we're lacking severely, where we assign people to different study group and a control group to help measure what we do. So in closing, I know I've presented a lot of information and some of this may seem like a long to-do list, but what I want to close with is this. Although there are great challenges in our profession, it is one of the best jobs in the world. We know that. It's time to share that with the rest of the world. That can't be done by letting MAHTN or AHGA or another regional group do the work. These organizations are our organizations. It's our work, not only practicing horticultural therapy on a daily basis, but also being involved in helping move the profession forward. So join your regional group, be an active member, and don't think it's somebody else's job to move the profession forward. It's all of our jobs. It's like a garden. Plants can't grow without water, food, sun, and space. We each have skills that can help the profession, and we each have to have a place here to help the profession of horticultural therapy move into the future.
Thank you, Derrick. Yeah, so for questions, please go ahead and submit your questions. And Jerry Sherman's actually going to facilitate this Q&A portion. Jerry?
Good morning, everyone. We have a few questions to get started with, but go ahead and type your questions in the Q&A so we can get to all of them. So Derrick, our first question is from Abby. Can you suggest how to start creating, hold on one second. I lost it. Can you suggest how to start creating research projects for a non-researcher?
Oh, good question. And so one of the things is we need to, I would say as a non-researcher, I think you need to connect with people that do research. And that's one thing that I'm, as I move past my dissertation and defense, I want to learn how to do that more. So one of the biggest challenges as a profession is if you look at the research, a lot of times, and this is not just our profession, but other healthcare professions, you'll see at the end there's a set of conclusions and recommendations and things. And one of the things I always say is, we had a small number of participants. We had 10. We need more numbers. And so one of the things we need to think about is, how do we do that in a therapeutic setting? Because as a therapist, I'm not going to work with a group of 100 people. I'm going to work with smaller groups. And so I think for people that are interested in being involved in research, is we need to have a place where there are researchers out there that you can connect with. And so that can be done, through, putting out, first of all, finding a group of researchers wanting to move forward together, and then having us connect with people that are doing practice, so then we can work together to develop that research. Because, one thing, somebody that has never researched before, it's going to be really hard to start a research project that's going to do solid research. So finding the people that have done research in the past is going to be important.
Okay, thank you, Derrick. Our next question is from Siri. Were you able to obtain feedback on your summer camp program that you had at University of Tennessee in terms of student and family satisfaction?
So are you talking about I'm assuming that's the camp program for the amputee coalition, or I guess I'm not sure
She wrote UTBG. Does that
Okay.
mean?
Yeah, so we do summer camps, and we do satisfaction at times, but it really wasn't part of, I guess, what we did in the study.
Okay. Amelia asks, did you find that state licensure is an issue that would increase our marketability?
So people did mention that state licensure, and it was connected a lot to insurance and credentialing. And so licensure is a tricky thing. As a recreational therapist, they have licensure. It's a state-based thing. So one of the challenges is we really need to first have some kind of national credentialing exam, and then move forward to state licensure. I think that's the steps that needs to be taken to do that. And AHTA is moving forward with another job task analysis next year. And so, and they are moving forward probably the next, I think they were hoping the next five years or so. But, and so once it takes a lot of advocacy to do licensure. So you have to eventually, you got to have some credential, and then you need to go to state legislature and start finding champions and politicians to start proposing legislation in the state to add licensure. And rec therapy has that in some states. And I don't remember how many total there are right now, but it has to be passed state by state. And that is a challenge. And one of the things that I've found with state licensure, and this is through rec therapy, is there's gonna be some pullback by other professions. This came from one of the retired professor in rec therapy. His name's Ton Salico, but he stood up and said, other professions are worried that we're going to take money away from them for insurance. And he actually pointed out and showed us on the website, one of the Occupational Therapy Association websites literally has a statement about recreational therapy, basically saying they don't support licensure for recreational therapists. So that's one of the challenges we're going to have too if we move towards licensure is the struggle that everybody's trying to get a piece of the dollar, and some people want to keep that money for themselves. And so licensure again is really challenging because you got to have, I think, the credentialing first, and then you got to have money to push forward that legislation in each state.
Okay. Our next question from Jonathan. Do the gardens at University of Tennessee provide any direct horticultural therapy services? And if so, how large are those programs?
So yeah, we do some direct programs. We have, and it has varied over the years. We've gotten grants to do research related to veterans and horticultural therapy, and we have in the past done programs for assisted living facilities. So we go in twice a month to facilities. We had about 15 to 17 facilities we were working with going twice a month before COVID hit, and since then we aren't able to go into those facilities. So we're having to we provide kits of garden materials and a lesson plan for their activity therapists to do and to operate. We also do work with Tennessee School for the Deaf. And so right now, instead of having them come to our gardens and do work and vocational training, I'm actually doing a Zoom meeting once a week for their students who have intellectual disabilities. And so I have a beginning knowledge of American Sign Language. So I'm signing with them and teaching them garden skills and horticultural skills that way. So yeah, we do a lot. And I work with interns as part of that too.
Okay. If anyone else has questions, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A section. I have a question for you. Do you think that because you did most of your research before COVID, that you would like to do some sort of additional research on how that's impacted the field?
Yes. I mean, I think that is one of my big limitations now because some ways I'm grateful that I wasn't doing a actual program and studying research participants because we would have had to cancel that because it would have still been going on during COVID. But yeah, the challenges that have come up since then were things that were on nobody's mind before that. So I'm interested in doing that kind of work and also looking at other professions too of how they are adapting, because I know in the assisted living facilities, a lot of people weren't even allowed to have groups. So they'd have to go room by room and doing those things. And so there's been a lot of changes that were missed in the study.
Okay. And then we have a question from Kathy. The AHTA mentioned in the recent member meeting that it's also working to have horticultural therapy recognized in the US job database, which we're not listed in now.
Yeah.
It's her understanding that we cannot create a license basis until we have this recognition. Did you come across this concern as well in talking with those of us who you interviewed?
Yeah. So, interesting enough, so I'm fairly new to the profession. We actually were listed by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics in 1991. We had a job classification. They changed some things. And then I think around 2000, they came up with an update. So they update that every 10 years or so. And they removed horticultural therapy as a job classification. They did the last job task analysis in, I think it was published in 2014. And they used that to help apply for the 2020 U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics job book or job outlook. And they got denied. And they were denied based on the rule stated basically they have to have a way to track the profession. So how do we know there's horticultural therapists? A lot of us are working in different titles that may not be a horticultural therapist title. Some of us may be other therapists and have our registration or be something else. So that becomes difficult of how they can track it. So there have been some changes and improvements. And one thing that has developed this year is the U.S. Department of Education. They have a system called, it's called a CIP code, CIP. It's a classification of instructional programs. And those codes are used to track the number of people taking courses in different subjects or majors or graduating different things. So this year they have released their update and they have included horticultural therapy as a new CIP code. So that is very, very exciting because that has never happened in the past history. And the CIP code system has been around since the 1980s, I believe. So that is one step forward to finding, hey, we know at least people are taking these courses. But yeah, and I don't know exactly because I've not been involved on the details about licensure, but it would make sense that there has to be some kind of job classification then to justify that. So that probably is another step that we've got to move forward on.
Interesting. Thank you. Let's see. Does anyone have any other questions? Let's see. So from Abby, a follow-up to her previous question, you've suggested connecting with other researchers and looking at whether horticultural therapists have done. Can you suggest where to find these folks?
And so that's a good question. So I do know in the United States, we do have, we've got, so the University of Tennessee, my position when I created this horticultural therapy position is in what's called, we have 3 different arms at the Institute of Agriculture, which is part of the university system. And one of there's the college, then we have extension, and we have ag research. And so now my position is ag research position. So that is my job. Part of what I'm supposed to do is research.
Mhm.
And so I also know that, we have some other universities around the country that do research. Rutgers is one of those. University of Florida, they've got a new certificate program, and they've done some research in the past. Kansas State has done research in the past. So one of the first steps for me particularly is starting to connect with these people and collaborate in different ways. So that's the first place to go. Another place to go is, let's say, if I'm trying to apply for an NIH grant, and one of the things I did for a grant that I tried to work on in the past was, it was related to dementia. And so we had a dementia researcher on campus in the Nursing Institute. So I contacted them because, all research staff at universities, their goal in keeping employed is being able to produce research funds. And so they're always looking for new opportunities. So finding, let's say if it's a program with a specific population, let's say if you work in a city and you work with people with intellectual disabilities. So look around at your universities in the area and see, is there somebody that does research with people with intellectual disabilities, and then approach them, send them an email, give them a phone call. And I've done that with NIH grants. One of the things that you can do is a lot of times put together a general idea of what you want to do. And then I can email the program leader for that NIH branch, and they'll call you, they'll talk to you, and they're very, very helpful. And that's where I learned about, you need to have somebody with funding background. And so, you might not get a research grant on that, but at least you learn more about doing research and helping try to find other people. And so that's where networking can connect to collaborating, is, networking with people, giving people a call and say, do you do this? And they say, no, but I know somebody else that does, and they can connect you with those people.
Mhm. Great. Let's see. I'm not seeing any other questions. Oh, here's one from Paula. What do you feel are the most important research questions to be answered to move the profession forward?
So in my dissertation, I've kind of listed out some next steps for me. Well, I think some of the most important things are, we need to know who out there is doing this. And I'll just take an example of, we've got American Horticultural Therapy Association. They have about 500 people that are members, and they have around 230, 250 HTRs. And if you look at all the studies that have been done in the past on horticultural therapy profession, they've only asked people from AHTA. So one of the things is, we're leaving out the regional groups, because there might be people that are members of that group that aren't part of AHTA. We're leaving out people that are graduating certificate programs or taking coursework, and may not become a member, or may not be professionally registered. So we need to have a broader understanding of who is using gardening in this nation as therapy. And that's not my idea. That's been suggested in the past. Dr. Diane Ralph has suggested that in years past. And in 2009 in Tennessee, we had there was a master's student here that did a study on Tennessee based on that. And there were studies back in the 70s, and there's not been anything since. So looking at other allied health professions using gardening, that one begins to help us understand what's going on. And two, it can help us learn about how we can interact and collaborate with these other people. So that's one area. And I think the next area then is looking at what programs are already operating. So understanding who's doing work, where they're working, and then that can help us inform us about, okay, we know that this is not an actual number. Well, let's say 90% of the people using gardening as therapy are doing it in assisted living facilities. That's where we need to do the research, start off, versus 2% doing this other population. So that also helps guide us to where we need to go with research.
Great, thank you. June asks, will you be publishing information from your dissertation?
Yes. So the timeline that I have right now is my defense seminar will be offered on November 2nd. It's going to be a lot different than this, more technical based. And then I'll have a defense after that with my committee. And so once I do that, I'll and if I pass, or if I succeed in that, I'll be able to complete graduation. At that point, there's not a single person on my committee that's going to let me walk away without publishing at least 2 peer-reviewed articles on this. And so they are strongly encouraging me to do that. One is the dean of the college, so who I kind of work for. So I will be doing that. So I'm looking at 2 publications based on the amount of information I had. Again, I had 8.5 hours of data. So there's a lot of information, and it's really hard to process it in one area. My current dissertation is about 44,000 words. And so what'll happen is I'll work on publishing in peer-reviewed journals. And then I will also, once that's done, then the dissertation will be published on the university where that also can be read.
I'm just a follow-up to that. I'm wondering, do you have an idea of how you'll be breaking the information up into different?
I do, and I've got kind of 3 different areas that I'm still working on, so I don't have them solidified yet.
Okay. Let's see. Does anyone else have any more questions?
Okay, I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you, Jerry, for
Thank you.
taking the questions. And Derrick, thank you again so much for sharing your research with us. You know, I personally found it informative, and I think a lot of people will find it motivating, especially in a year where, you know, it's been kind of demotivating for a lot of horticultural therapists who don't have the traditional access to the populations they serve.
Mm-hmm.
So we do appreciate that. And on behalf of MAHTN, I want to congratulate you on completing your research and on your soon completing everything you need for your PhD. So congratulations. For everyone else, again, thank you for coming. The final webinar of the year will be December 12th, where we'll talk about some winter HT activities from a multicultural perspective. So I'll be sending an invitation out for that sometime this upcoming week. So hope you can attend that as well. So again, thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Abby for the annual meeting. Abby?
Okay. Hi, everybody. Derrick, I want to say thank you on behalf of MAHTN, on behalf of the board. That was a fantastic presentation and really, really great information. So I hope, and I really look forward to the publications of that material. So thank you so much. That was really great. And I encourage everybody to take all his advice as we move forward. I'm going to go. So this is our annual meeting and awards ceremony. We usually have this event at our annual conference, which takes place this time of year. And just so you know, we are planning to do the conference that was scheduled for this year. We do plan to do in person next year at this time. Hopefully by then we'll be meeting in person again. And at that time, we will do these presentations in person so you can meet the individuals who've received our scholarships and awards for 2020. Okay, I'm going to go right to a PowerPoint here, sharing my screen. And so this is our annual members meeting and award ceremony. And hold on, I got to get used to this. Okay, so first off, I'm going to give you the president's report. So in 2019, we did a member survey, an extensive member survey, if you remember, and we summarized the information that we got from that survey, and we came up with some key target actions for the board to work on in this year, 2020. And just to summarize what those things were, it broke down into 2 categories. The first one being communication and member engagement, second one being program content and resources. In communication and member engagement, you indicated to us, or we decided that we would launch new forms of communication, that we would increase our focus on the potting shed, which is our members only area of our website. Also, try to upgrade our jobs board. You wanted us to be more visible in terms of what the board activities were and who was involved. And you wanted more volunteer engagement. You wanted more opportunities, and you wanted to have more engagement with the board. In terms of programming, the biggest takeaway we had was that you wanted to see more diversity, both in the members' background and experience for future programming. And so